For 6 years, I sacrificed my life, career, and dignity to care for my ungrateful husband and his paralyzed mother. They called me useless until I walked away and earned triple their respect elsewhere. But when my mother-in-law hurled a mug from our 10th floor balcony, killing her son by accident, I realized revenge doesn't always need to be planned. Sometimes, karma just knows the perfect timing. Mandy had spent the last 6 years of her life living within the suffocating confines of someone else's definition of a good wife. Once a vibrant, independent woman with a fulfilling career as an HR associate, she allowed herself to be transformed into a ghost. Her husband, Mike, had persuaded her to quit her job, promising to take care of her financially while she stayed home to care for his paralyzed mother, Susan, and their daughter Annie. But every month, asking Mike for money felt like begging for a handout. He transferred just $1,500, a meager amount that he acted like was a generous favor. Mandy had become the live-in maid, nurse, cook, cleaner, and full-time caregiver without an ounce of appreciation. She endured daily microaggressions, with Susan constantly criticizing her cooking and housekeeping, and Mike deflecting every complaint. The final straw came the day Annie fell ill with a fever, and Mandy had no money to buy medicine. In a panic, she called Mike only to be met with cold annoyance and a dismissive, "Figure it out." That night, Mandy stood over the dinner table, shaking with rage. She unleashed every word she had bottled for years. Her voice, once careful, now cut through the silence like a blade. She reminded Mike that she had given up her independence, her income, and her dignity to serve this family. And in return, she was treated like a freeloader. Susan gasped. Mike's eyes widened. Mandy was no longer pleading, she was demanding. When Mike tried to hand her a check to clean up Susan's latest accident, Mandy slapped it back on the table. "I'm done. I'm not your maid. I'm not your nurse. I'm not your victim. Clean up your mess." Disarmed and red-faced, Mike had no choice but to tend to his mother. His disgust was visible, but for once, Mandy didn't care. The next morning, Susan began her usual chorus of commands demanding tea, assistance with dressing, and help to the bathroom, but Mandy was unmoved. She brewed tea for herself and Annie and left Susan to fuming. When Susan tried her usual guilt trip, sprinkling flattery into her barbs, Mandy didn't even respond. Later, Mandy dropped Annie off at Mike's office, forcing him to experience firsthand what caregiving truly meant. Mike, ill-prepared and impatient, brought Annie into his office, where she became a disruption. After being scolded by his boss, Mike left Annie outside the building to fend for herself. Mandy received a tearful call from her daughter. Her heartbreak was instant, but instead of crying, she acted. She called the police to report child abandonment. When she arrived at the scene, she brought evidence, screenshots of messages to Mike begging him to come get Annie, witnesses who had seen her alone and scared, and tears that turned heads. The cops took it seriously. Mike's colleagues stared. His reputation, the one he built pretending to be a loving father and successful professional, was crumbling. That night, the tension in the house was suffocating. Mike mocked Mandy's plan to work again, as what, a maid? She looked him dead in the eye. A respected caregiver. The pay, $7,000 a month. And unlike you, they pay on time. Susan groaned from the other room, demanding food. Mandy ignored her. She made dinner only for herself and Annie. She even plated it beautifully, setting it on the table like it was a celebration. When Mike threatened divorce, Mandy chuckled. "Please do. You'd be doing me a favor." Mike stared at her, searching for the meek woman he once controlled. But she was gone. For the first time in years, Mandy slept soundly. The next day, Susan spat out the spaghetti Mike had boiled. "This is disgusting. Too salty," she barked, her eyes locked longingly on the lemon shrimp Mandy had prepared for Annie. Mandy made no move to help. She and Annie quietly ate their dinner while Susan fumed. That night marked the beginning of a shift in the household. Mandy stopped doing anything for Mike and Susan. She only cooked, cleaned, and cared for herself and her daughter. The house began to unravel. Dishes piled up. Laundry went unwashed. Susan's hygiene deteriorated. Some days, she soiled herself and cried for hours. Mandy ignored her screams. Mike's once organized life descended into disarray. One afternoon, Susan had an accident while Mike was in the middle of a high-stakes video conference. Her screaming drowned out his presentation. After the call, humiliated and furious, Mike approached Mandy with hollow eyes. "Mandy, I'm sorry. I know I messed up. Let's fix this. I'll pay you $4,000 a month, Every month. Just please. Help me. She looked at him coolly. Too late. She revealed she had accepted a live-in caregiving job, $7,000 a month, meals included. Mike panicked. You're being scammed. No one pays that much. Oh, they do. Because their mother has a terrible temper, and no one else can handle her. But after Susan, this will be easy. Hearing her name, Susan wheeled into the room, pale. You're leaving. What about me? You can ask your son to hire someone. But with your attitude, it'll cost at least $10,000 a month. Mike's temper snapped. Fine, get out, pay rent or leave. Unfazed, Mandy sent a voice message to her new employer. Miss Lucy, I'll accept the live-in job. Annie and I can move in tomorrow. Miss Lucy replied almost instantly. Mandy, thank you. We'll add $500 more to your salary. You're a lifesaver. Mandy declined the raise, saying having a peaceful home was enough. She packed quietly. Susan screamed. Mike begged. Mandy ignored them both. They tried using Annie to control her again. But after the police incident, Mike dared not push further. Reports from neighbors were like free entertainment. Susan bullied every maid until they quit. Mike screamed at Susan one night, blaming her for Mandy's departure. But Mandy knew better. He was just as guilty. Later, she visited the house, beautifully dressed and composed. Susan was berating a third maid, who finally snapped and stormed out. When Susan saw Mandy, she wailed, I was wrong. Please come back. Mandy didn't answer. She began packing Annie's remaining toys. On the balcony, she spotted 2 dolls and stepped out to grab them. Suddenly, a scream. A mug flew through the air. Mandy ducked. The mug sailed out the window. From the 10th floor, she rushed to the balcony and looked down. A man lay sprawled on the pavement. It was Mike. She bolted downstairs and called 911. But Mike was gone. The mug had killed him instantly at the hospital. Susan collapsed in hysterics, then turned on Mandy. You cursed him. You evil witch. Give me back my son. Mandy didn't flinch. Your son is dead because of you. You murdered him. She reported the incident. But with Susan's disability, jail was unlikely. The estate was divided legally. Mandy let Susan keep the house and took nothing more than her rightful share. She had peace. That was worth more. Years later, Mandy learned Susan had died. The house once promised to a nephew had secretly been willed to Annie. Mandy arranged the funeral, sold the house, and moved on. Some called it Susan's redemption. Mandy called it what it was, spite. But even spite couldn't undo the justice of fate. Mandy's new life began in a sunlit sea-facing home nestled in a quiet coastal town. The estate belonged to Miss Lucy, a retired judge with stern eyes and a sharp tongue. Lucy's mother, Adelaide, was a double amputee with a reputation for chewing through caregivers faster than a wolf through sheep, but not Mandy. She faced Adelaide's barbed insults with unflinching calm. When Adelaide hurled a tray across the room, Mandy didn't flinch. She simply returned with a new cup of tea, hotter than before, her expression unreadable. Annie, ever resilient, adapted quickly to the new surroundings. She helped Mandy with little chores and spent her afternoons drawing by the window, overlooking the waves. 3 weeks into the job, Lucy called Mandy into her study. You're extraordinary, Lucy said simply. Most caregivers quit within 48 hours. You've lasted nearly a month and somehow managed to get my mother to smile. She reminds me of someone I used to care for, Mandy replied dryly. Lucy smiled. You're not just a caregiver, Mandy, you're a survivor. If you ever want more administration, coordination, or advocacy work, I'll help you. I have connections. It was the first time in years Mandy had heard someone offer her something without strings attached. Her eyes watered, but she blinked them away. Thank you, she said. I'd like that. That weekend, while shopping for groceries, Mandy heard a familiar voice, one that chilled her blood. Turning slowly, she locked eyes with Ethan Holt, her ex-fiancé, the one who had abandoned her a decade ago, ghosting her days before their wedding, leaving her humiliated in front of hundreds. He had been her first love, and her first betrayal. He looked older, softer, but still impossibly charming. Mandy, he said, stunned. I thought you moved to London. I did, she replied coolly. Then I moved on. He laughed nervously. You look good. Good. She forced a polite smile. You don't. They stood in silence for a moment until Ethan stepped closer. I've changed, Mandy. I know I hurt you, but if you'd let me explain. I wouldn't, she interrupted. Whatever your reason, it died the day you disappeared. Don't disturb its grave. But that night, Mandy couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her mind tugged by something Ethan had said as she walked away. You were always too good for me. I see that now. But someone else sees it too and they don't like that you're happy. The next morning, an anonymous envelope was left on the porch. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. You left behind a mess, Mandy, and now the past is coming to collect. And beneath it, a photo of Annie playing in the garden. Mandy's hands shook. The new life she had built, the peace she had earned, was under threat. And she didn't know from whom. But one thing was certain. She wouldn't run this time. She would fight. The new home smelled of citrus and lavender, the kind of gentle fragrances that promised peace. Mandy stood in the doorway of Miss Lucy's house now, her workplace and sanctuary. It wasn't a mansion, but it was comfortable and calm, with none of the screaming or tension she had lived with for years. Annie, wearing her favorite butterfly shirt, explored her new room with wide eyes and delighted gasps. Mom, there's a reading nook, she squealed, bouncing onto a window seat stacked with pillows. Mandy smiled. It's all yours, sweetheart. Her heart swelled with cautious hope. For the first time in years, she wasn't suffocating. Miss Lucy's mother, Beatrice, was indeed temperamental, but Mandy had faced far worse. Beatrice barked orders and hurled sharp words like daggers, but Mandy handled her with cool grace. She fed her on time, administered her medications meticulously, and never raised her voice. The routine was exhausting but predictable. Miss Lucy observed quietly at first, concerned that Mandy might quit like the others, but as weeks passed, her admiration grew. You're extraordinary, she said one afternoon, watching Mandy prepare Beatrice's dinner. I don't know how you do it. Mandy gave a tired smile. Years of training. By the third month, Mandy had earned more than she had in the last 2 years with Mike combined. She bought Annie new clothes, enrolled her in an art class, and started putting away savings. They celebrated Annie's 8th birthday with a trip to the zoo and strawberry cake. Life was no longer about survival, it was about healing. But shadows have long fingers. One evening, after Beatrice had fallen asleep, Mandy checked her phone and froze. A message from an unknown number lit up her screen. Do you sleep well at night? After everything you've done. She deleted it, chalking it up to a bitter relative of Mike or Susan. But the messages continued. Anonymous numbers, blocked calls, even a cryptic voicemail. A woman sobbing, followed by silence. Miss Lucy noticed Mandy's anxiety. Everything okay? Mandy lied. Just someone from the past trying to stir trouble. It'll go away. But it didn't. One afternoon, as she walked Annie home from school, a black car slowly followed them. When Mandy turned to confront the driver, it sped off. Her instincts screamed. This wasn't a coincidence. This was deliberate. Later that night, she received a package with no return address. Inside was a framed photo of Mike and anyone Mandy didn't even know existed. Scrawled across it in red ink were the words, "You don't deserve peace." Mandy's hands trembled as she showed the package to Miss Lucy. "We're calling the police," Lucy insisted, but Mandy hesitated. The police had helped before, but she feared whoever was behind this wanted her afraid, not just legally cornered. The true power was in making her feel unsafe in her newfound stability. "I'll install cameras. Change our routines. But I won't run again," Mandy said. Her voice was steel. Lucy nodded. "You're not alone in this." Meanwhile, Mandy began her quiet investigation. She reached out to one of Mike's old colleagues, someone who had sympathized during the child abandonment scandal. "Any idea who might want revenge?" she asked. The woman hesitated, then said, "Mike's cousin Lorna. She always blamed you for everything." Mandy frowned. She remembered Lorna vaguely always lurking during holidays, whispering in Susan's ear. "She said you killed Mike. She's been trying to dig into your life ever since." Mandy's blood chilled. "Thanks," she whispered. It all made sense now. The messages, the photo, the shadow in the car. Lorna. She wasn't just trying to scare Mandy. She was trying to unravel her. But Mandy had rebuilt herself once. She wouldn't break again. The days that followed were a test of Mandy's resilience. She refused to crumble, though the shadow of Lorna's threats darkened every hour. Security cameras were installed around Miss Lucy's home. Mandy made sure. Annie's school knew not to release her to anyone without written consent. Still, unease clung to her like static. Then one morning, Mandy found the front gate spray-painted with a single word, murderer. Miss Lucy was livid. We're pressing charges. Enough is enough. Mandy nodded. I'll handle this. She contacted Detective Ramirez, the same officer who'd handled the child abandonment case years ago. He remembered her well. Mandy showed him the photos, the messages, the surveillance footage showing a woman matching Lorna's build near the gate at night. We'll open an investigation, Ramirez promised, but you need to stay alert. Mandy went a step further. She dug into public court records and learned that Lorna had recently filed a frivolous civil suit claiming Mandy had driven Mike to suicide. The case was built on emotion, not evidence, but the intention was clear: to smear Mandy's name. Mandy prepared her response with the help of Miss Lucy's lawyer. They gathered testimony from doctors who had treated Susan, police reports, financial records proving neglect from Mike, and even neighbors who had witnessed the abuse. The court hearing was packed. Lorna arrived in dramatic black, clutching a photo of Mike. He was my cousin, my best friend. He deserved better than her, she declared, pointing at Mandy. Mandy stood calmly. When it was her turn, she recounted every indignity, every sacrifice, and every ignored plea. She described Susan's manipulation, Mike's control, and the night he died. Then she looked straight at Lorna. You want someone to blame because grief is too heavy to hold. But you chose the wrong enemy. The judge dismissed the case, calling it a tragic attempt to defame a survivor. After court, as Mandy and Annie walked outside into the sunlight, Lorna approached. This isn't over, she hissed. Mandy didn't flinch. Yes, it is. For both our sakes, let it be. Days later, a package arrived at Miss Lucy's home, this time from an anonymous sender. Inside was a single note. I'm done. He wasn't who I thought he was. I hope your daughter grows up free. No signature, but Mandy knew it was Lorna. It was the closest thing to an apology she'd ever get. With the threat finally gone, peace returned. Mandy's life blossomed. She earned her caregiver certification, began consulting new families, and even spoke at local women's shelters about reclaiming dignity after domestic abuse. Annie grew into a bright, confident girl, her past a shadow but never a prison. And Mandy. She finally felt free, not because life was easy, but because she had faced the storm and walked through it. She had broken the silence. And in doing so, she had found her voice.